My husband chose his boss's name for our son behind my back. I can't shake the feeling. This wasn't just about a name, it's a betrayal I never saw coming. I, 31F, and my husband, 35M, just had our first child 2 weeks ago. I thought we were decided on the name the day of his birth, but apparently my dumbass husband changed his mind. The name we were going for originally is also the name of my veteran grandfather who passed away a couple years back. Yesterday morning, the birth certificate came in the mail. I found out my husband didn't actually register the name we had both discussed and agreed on. The name registered on the birth certificate is the last name of his boss, who also is a woman. I initially tried gaslighting myself that the wrong one was shipped, but the package had both our full names and phone numbers written on the front sticker, so the evidence that this was not an accident was already close to solid. Yesterday evening, when my husband came home from work, I asked him what he named our child in a passive-aggressive way, and he responded with the original name we decided on. I then asked why it said "the name" on the package, and he is saying he doesn't know. I called the hospital, and there he was, for sure the one who registered it. I finally got him to admit it, but he didn't give a good reason to why he decided to name our child after his boss, who was accused for fraud in the company instead of the name that was supposed to honor my grandfather. After 5 years of being together, I no longer trust him, and I am planning to file a divorce in the next few months. My younger sister, 26F, thinks it's not a big deal, and I should let go. Also, she compared to when I named my hamster after something funny when I was 21, and she texted me and said that, just like that hamster, that baby won't care, so get over yourself. I don't know if I should be taking this as seriously as I am now. I am starting to think there is a possible affair going on, but maybe I am overreacting and he just really likes the name. After I posted the story on my Instagram story, a friend told me that I should make an account on here and ask for opinion. Update 1. So, it's been a whirlwind. Since I first found out my husband put his boss's name on our son's birth certificate, I've been racking my brain, trying to make sense of why he'd do this. For context, this wasn't some quick slip-up. This was a name we'd planned for months, one with meaning. When we found out I was pregnant, I immediately thought of naming our son after my grandfather. He was a big part of my life, always steady, always supportive, and his passing a couple of years ago left a huge gap in my heart. The idea of giving our son his name felt like a way to honor that memory. My husband seemed on board, or at least I thought he was. We talked about it so many times, each time ending with him saying he liked the idea. But apparently, I was wrong. Yesterday, when I found the birth certificate, I felt this awful sinking feeling. At first, I honestly thought there must have been a mistake. I mean, I couldn't even imagine why my husband would switch the name we agreed on to his boss's last name, of all things. So I went through all these stages of denial in the span of about 5 minutes. I even tried telling myself maybe it was a hospital error or the printer messed something up. Then, after reading our names and contact details right there on the envelope, I realized this wasn't a clerical mistake. I just stared at the envelope, at our son's name, and it felt like my brain was short-circuiting. I was furious but almost paralyzed with shock. So when my husband came home from work, I tried to keep things as calm as I could. I asked him point blank what he put on the birth certificate. He looked at me like he didn't know what I was talking about and rattled off the name we agreed on. He even had this casual look on his face, like he wasn't hiding anything. So I pressed him on it, saying that the name on the actual document didn't match what he just said. I asked why his boss's name was on it instead. At first, he gave me this blank stare like I was making it up, then claimed he didn't know how that happened, that maybe the hospital must have messed up. His reaction felt strange. If he'd made an honest mistake, wouldn't he be more apologetic or even a bit embarrassed? But he just kept this poker face like he was hoping I'd drop it and forget the whole thing. That rubbed me the wrong way. After a few minutes, I had to step outside to breathe. Then, when I came back, I told him I'd already called the hospital to confirm that he, in fact, was the one who registered the name. He just sat there, silent, not even trying to deny it. I had to push and push before he finally admitted he'd changed it. But he wouldn't tell me why. Just sat there saying it wasn't a big deal, like we'd named the family dog or something. Then, as if to downplay everything, he had the nerve to tell me that he didn't think the name was that serious, that we could change it later if I really wanted to. But what shocked me the most was how little he seemed to understand why I was upset. He kept saying, "It's just a name, why are you making this a big deal?" But it's not just a name to me, it's a name that symbolizes a connection to my grandfather, a person I loved deeply. And to make things worse, the name he replaced it with wasn't some random name he just liked. It was the last name of his boss, a woman who's been in hot water at work for allegedly defrauding the company. To be clear, his boss isn't some childhood friend or long-lost cousin. She's just his manager at work. Someone he's only known for a couple of years, and from what he's told me, she's not exactly a great person. He's complained multiple times about her poor leadership, even mentioned how some of his coworkers think she's a nightmare. So why the hell would he choose her name for our son, especially when he knew how much my grandfather's name meant to me? There's this gnawing feeling in my gut that something's going on, something he's not telling me. I hate that my mind even goes there, but I can't shake the thought that there might be more between them than just a professional relationship. After I shared the news with my sister, she told me I was overreacting, comparing it to the time I named a hamster after a fictional character in college. She kept saying, "Just like that hamster, the baby won't care what his name is." Her reaction hurt because I thought she'd understand, but instead, she's just brushing it off as if I'm obsessing over nothing. I haven't told my parents yet, partly because I'm embarrassed and partly because I know they'll be livid if they find out he disrespected my grandfather's memory like this. But I did vent a little to one of my close friends, and she immediately suggested that I should look deeper into this situation, maybe even consider it a red flag. That was kind of a wake-up call. I ended up spending a few hours just lying awake that night, going over every little detail in my head. I started wondering if there were other red flags I missed over the years. Did I ignore signs that he wasn't actually on board with this name, or worse, that he had some weird attachment to his boss? I know I'm spiraling, but the situation just feels surreal. I mean, who does this? Who changes their kid's name without even mentioning it to their spouse, especially when it's a name with personal meaning? I've started questioning everything, how well I know him, if I can even trust him. After all this, I've begun to consider the idea of divorce seriously. It's not just about the name, it's about the betrayal, and the fact that he refuses to acknowledge why this matters to me. For the past 5 years, I thought I had a partner I could trust, someone I could rely on. But this incident is making me question if that was all just wishful thinking. I keep wondering if this behavior is just the tip of the iceberg, a sign of deeper issues I ignored or downplayed. I haven't told him I'm thinking about divorce yet, but honestly, it's on my mind constantly. The whole situation has left me feeling isolated. My sister doesn't get it, and my husband's acting like it's no big deal. I haven't even seen my son's name on paper without feeling a mix of rage and heartbreak. A part of me wants to confront his boss directly and ask if she has any clue what's going on. But then I worry that would just make me look desperate or paranoid, like some unhinged spouse jumping to conclusions. I feel trapped between wanting answers and not wanting to unravel my life over a suspicion. But if there's even a slight chance he's hiding something serious, I think I deserve to know the truth. So here I am, debating my next move. I know I need to think carefully before doing anything drastic, but every time I look at my son, I feel like I owe it to him to make things right. Whether that means confronting my husband, looking deeper into his relationship with his boss, or even following through with a divorce, I'm just not sure yet. Update 2. Alright, so after sitting with everything for a bit, I decided I couldn't leave things the way they were. The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I felt. The idea that my husband would just randomly decide to name our child after his boss without a real reason seemed too strange. It was like I was missing a piece of the puzzle, and I knew I couldn't get any peace of mind until I figured out what was really going on. I started small. I went back over every conversation we'd had about names during the pregnancy, trying to pick up on any signs that he'd been pushing back on my grandfather's name. And honestly, there was nothing. He always seemed on board, nodding along and even mentioning how much he'd loved spending time with my grandfather. It felt like a genuine thing. He'd even told me multiple times how meaningful it would be for our son to carry a family name, especially since my grandfather had been a respected figure in both our families. So where did that attitude go? And how did it turn into this sudden, random decision to name our son after a woman he barely knew? The next step felt a little sneaky, but I couldn't help myself. I went through some of his stuff, specifically his phone and his work email on his computer. Yes, I know it sounds bad, but at this point, I felt justified. I didn't find anything earth-shattering at first, just the usual boring work emails and messages with friends. But when I checked his sent messages in his personal email, something strange popped up. A couple of months ago, he had sent a long email to his boss. In it, he was explaining some issue they were having with a big project, and right at the end, he mentioned how grateful he was for her mentorship and how she had changed his perspective on his career path. I thought it was a little weird. Why would he write such a personal message to someone he'd described to me as a nightmare boss? Then I found an email to a friend of his, talking about how he was considering a career shift because of his boss's influence and how he owed her a lot. This might be totally innocent, sure, but given the circumstances, it set off alarm bells for me. He's always acted like his job was just a way to pay the bills, nothing he was especially passionate about. I can't even count the times he came home grumbling about how much he hated the stress and politics at his company. But suddenly, he's talking like this woman is his personal hero. Now, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but this feels way too close to the classic affair red flags I've heard about. Someone who used to hate their job suddenly can't stop talking about how wonderful their boss is, writing her gratitude emails, naming our child after her. And what was even stranger, he's been coming home late more often these past few weeks, claiming he's had to stay for extra projects. I didn't think much of it before because, well, we just had a baby, and work has been busy for him in general. But now, I'm feeling paranoid and I hate it. So, I confronted him again. This time, I asked him about those emails and the sudden career shift, and I didn't hold back about how suspicious everything looked. I tried to keep calm, but I couldn't hide how angry I felt. He just looked completely shocked, like he hadn't even considered how shady his actions appeared. He told me that his boss had been supportive during some rough patches at work, and that he respected her as a mentor. He swore up and down that there was nothing more to it, but when I pressed him on the late nights and naming our son after her, he got defensive. He told me I was overthinking it, that his boss just inspired him and made him realize he could aim higher in his career. I can't say I fully believe him, though. He said it with the right words, sure, but his face was another story. There was something in his expression that just didn't feel sincere. It reminded me of when someone's caught red-handed and tries to backpedal, hoping they can talk their way out of it. And to make matters worse, he tried to shift the blame onto me, saying I was being irrational and hormonal from the pregnancy. That line really stung. I mean, here I am, questioning my whole reality, and he's dismissing it as hormones. After that, I needed space. I grabbed the baby and took a drive to clear my head. I ended up going to my parents' house, even though I hadn't told them the full story yet. I just needed someone who'd understand. My mom could tell something was wrong the second I walked in, but I told her I needed to figure some things out before talking about it. She didn't push, but she stayed close, just sitting with me while I held my son and tried to make sense of everything. That moment made me realize just how heavy this situation was. It felt like I was carrying around a lead weight, unable to trust my own partner. When I finally got home later that night, my husband was already asleep. I stayed up, thinking about everything, and ended up doing something I never thought I'd do. I called a lawyer. I haven't made any decisions, but I wanted to understand my options if things go south. It felt extreme, but honestly, knowing that there's a possible way out if this mess keeps spiraling was like a small piece of relief. I haven't told him about this, obviously, and I don't plan to unless I really have to. But at this point, I have to consider the possibility that our marriage might not make it through this. Today, I received a message from a coworker of his. She's someone I know loosely from a couple of work events, and she messaged me out of the blue, asking if everything was okay. She said she'd noticed that my husband and his boss seemed close lately, and that a few people in the office had started talking about it. That was the nail in the coffin for me. I know people gossip and that office rumors aren't always reliable, but it lined up with too much of what I'd already been seeing. She didn't say outright that there was an affair, but she hinted that their relationship seemed a bit too friendly. I thanked her, not wanting to overreact, but it's like she confirmed all my worst fears. Now I'm left with two options. Keep pressing him until he either admits what's really going on or keep my distance and figure out a quiet exit strategy. Part of me wants to blow this whole thing open, confront his boss, and get the truth once and for all. But the rational part of me knows that might just end up making me look foolish, especially if I'm wrong. And if I'm being honest, I feel like I'm unraveling. It's not just about my husband anymore. It's about the fact that the person I trusted most in the world suddenly feels like a stranger, and I don't know if I'll ever get that trust back. I'm debating whether to bring up counseling or if that's a lost cause. Right now, he's still trying to play it off like it's not a big deal, so I don't even know if he'd agree to therapy or take it seriously. And there's also this bitter part of me that doesn't even want to try because I feel so betrayed. But for the sake of our son, maybe it's worth a shot. Anyway, that's where things stand. I feel completely stuck, like every choice I have is a bad one. But at the end of the day, I can't keep living like this, constantly questioning if my husband's loyalty lies with his own family or with someone else. I haven't made any final decisions yet, but something's going to have to change, one way or another.